is Coach Mel, Melanie Potock, and I am the co-author along with Dr. Nnamdi Frando, Dr. Young, of Raising a Healthy, Happy Eater. And this is our virtual book club. We're going to be talking about chapters 4, 5, and 6, which is basically starting solids and all the way up to almost age 2. And then we'll be doing more in a few weeks with our older kids. So welcome.
Welcome. I'm Dr. Young, also known as Dr. Nnamdi Fernando, and I'm a pediatrician in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And I'm so happy to be talking with you about one of my favorite topics, which is starting solids. It's always a fun thing for me to talk about with families. They always get really excited about when their babies can start real food. So it's an exciting topic and really fun to explore that with families.
And in your office, in your pediatric office, Young Pediatrics, you have a big teaching kitchen, and don't you teach baby food classes there?
I do. So I head up an organization called the Dr. Young Project, and to make things a little bit convenient for myself, we built a big teaching kitchen in my office, and the Dr. Young Project's mission is really to help families make the connection between good food and good health. So we do a lot of nutrition education and cooking instruction. And we offer classes to our entire community. And I often encourage my own private patients to attend some baby class, which is probably my favorite class to teach because there's just so much excitement and anticipation about getting babies eating their food. In fact, my quarterly class for this quarter is going to be on Sunday. And I'm super excited. I have a whole new round of patients that are wanting to come in and learn about starting solids and making solids and what and when. And there's so many questions about it. And we let families bring whoever they want to the class. They get one ticket, they get to bring their baby and maybe their mom or, grandparents or whomever will be helping to feed the baby so everyone's on the same page, which is also really important. Some of the trends in feeding have, changed a little bit from the time that some of the grandmas and grandparents have fed. And so it's nice if everybody kind of understands how the parents want to feed their babies.
And you and I had the good fortune of writing Raising a Healthy, Happy Eater together, which of course covers birth to school age. And just recently I had my new book come out, Baby Self-Feeding. It's right behind me. And it focuses on 6 months to 18 months of age, that first true year of feeding solids. And I wrote that along with Nancy Ripton because this trend of baby-led weaning has gotten, some parents are a little confused by it, and I wanted to offer not only tips on how to offer solid foods, but purees. And I know therapists often think of purees as being solids, but parents don't. They tend to think of solid foods as foods that you can pick up with your hands. And really, purees and, steamed vegetables, or roasted vegetables, or soft pieces of meat, all of those are solids. And it's knowing how to present those safely for your little one is what's most important. Because of course, what we care most about is making sure that it's a safe experience and it's a joyful experience. So I remember you told me a story once about a little baby who was in one of your cooking classes. And I think it was maybe an older cooking class, and you were making that really good lemony hummus that you like to make. And didn't the baby try hummus for the first time? And it was a pretty young baby.
Yeah, it was a pretty young baby. This was a mom that had brought her probably 4-year-old to one of my preschool classes. And the mom was wearing this beautiful little infant who was probably about 7 months at the time. She said to me, "We've been trying solids and this baby just really doesn't love them yet." And so I said, well, maybe it's that you're doing jarred foods, which are fine, but don't have a lot of flavor. And maybe your baby just needs more flavor. So we were making a lemony hummus for the preschoolers. And it's a very flavorful hummus with this lemon rind that you blend in, and lemon juice and a little bit of garlic, not too much because garlic can be a little spicy for the preschoolers, but very flavorful. And this baby just lapped up this hummus. He loves solids. So I gave her some suggestions about food that she could prepare at home that maybe had more flavor and wasn't so watered down. And the next class, she gave me a great report of how this baby was now enjoying so many solids. So cute and heartwarming to see.
That's so awesome. It's made me think of it because I literally just left my last client of the day, and it's a little one who is just over a year old, but has a little bit of a feeding delay and is only eating super smooth purees. Like, we think of yogurt actually as a puree, super, super smooth. And we pulled out some hummus, and that kid ate better than I've ever seen before. And it surprised me because not only is hummus really flavorful, but it's got a little more texture and grit to it, and it's got a little bit more weight on the tongue, but he loved it. So we can talk about in a few minutes maybe ways to start some of those solid foods. But mostly I want everyone who's listening at home to understand that purees are not a bad thing. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote Baby Self-Feeding, is to help therapists and parents understand that purees offer this lovely bridge to really comfortable, pleasant food experiences. And it helps kids learn to swallow and tolerate a variety of foods as they're picking up like steamed broccoli and mouthing on it. It can also be really helpful in terms of nutrition, because if you skip the puree and sometimes the cereal stage, the kids can end up low in iron and sometimes certain B vitamins. You have to be cautious of that. The main thing to remember, though, is that if babies continue on purees past the age of 9 months, are only on purees past the age of 9 months, they're very likely to develop feeding difficulties. And that's because, as we always say, feeding is a developmental process, and you need to move through the various stages. You don't want to linger in one stage. So purees aren't a bad thing. They definitely have a purpose.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Give some confidence too. Just jumping to the stage that may be a little bit scary for them as parents, they can take confidence that, okay, this baby has the skills to be able to swallow something other than my breast milk or formula, and is doing a good job at it, and maybe now I can move to the next stage.
I love that, because it's not only a confidence builder for the child, but for the caregiver, the parent as well, because feeding is very much based on relationship. So I like that a lot. One of the things I thought maybe everybody would like to hear about is, when you are first starting with purees, what spoon to use? What are some of the ways that you can get started to really set kids up for success? So, in our course on parentinginthekitchen.com, for those of you who may not know, we have a 5-hour video course. It's only $39.99, and it walks you through the process of feeding. And although it's called the Picky Eater course, it's really a great course for everyone to watch, especially if they just want to be careful that perhaps they can avoid the picky eater trap and know what red flags they should watch for. One of the things we talk about in there are spoons and dippers. So I just want to give you a brief idea of perhaps where to start. The very first step to learning to use a spoon is dipping. Whether you dip with your fingers or whether you dip with a big fat carrot, one that a kid couldn't really snap off, something that's safe, keep an eye on them, or whether you use something like, this is my favorite dipper, these are called Nums. If you go to nnum.com, you can take a look at these, and we will also have these on our store at Parenting in the Kitchen. We're about to update our store. And Dr. Yum, tell them, if they buy something through our store, can you tell them a little bit about how that benefits your nonprofit?
Absolutely. So we set up the store as basically a convenient way of families being able to find the products that we love, that we've had experience with, and be able to try them at home. And the great thing about our store is whatever proceeds we get from the store go back to the Dr. Yum Project, which is, as I mentioned, the nonprofit that I started in Fredericksburg. And with those funds, we're able to do lots of other programs that help other families raise healthy, happy eaters as well. So it's a big giving circle, actually.
Yeah. So, well, one of the things that if you do want to start with a dipper, and it could be fingers, it could be a big piece of vegetable, whatever, you could also try a Num Num dips. And I love these because the surface of them, they have this really nice ridged area for the little hands to grab. And they have a interior that's kind of a silicone filling, and they have one that's open. So for kids who need a little bit more proprioceptive input or a little bit more tactile input to their tongue, they really like these. And kids who like a smoother one like this. But this is what that I was eating hummus with today. It was fantastic. He just loved it. And you know what? He never dropped it because he can get such a good grip on it. Usually, though, we think about when we're first starting to offer a spoon to a child, we use sort of our traditional Gerber coated spoon. And I love this spoon because I have kind of big hands and I like a long, narrow handle, and it's got a really flat coated surface, which is what you need for little babies' mouths. Something small, not a big metal spoon like the kind we stir our coffee with, but something small where you can guide it in, and when their mouth closes on it, you can pull straight out and deposit the food. In our Picky Eater course, we talk about what not to do, which is to lift up and scrape on the roof of their mouth. This spoon, though, is not a good one for little kids because this narrow, skinny, slippery handle, it just ends up getting tossed. You want something that has a pretty fat handle, a short handle, maybe with a nice curve to it, so that when their little fists go around it, it's very close to what we call the spoon bowl. This particular model actually has a little bend to it, which is nice because once you learn to dip, then you learn to come up and rotate your wrist and go straight into your mouth. So this is a little bit more advanced. It also has holes in it, which is great for kids who perhaps are working on cereal and milk. The milk will drip right through and the cereal will stick to the bowl of the spoon. It's a lot of different spoons. We talk more about it in our course. But you can also use something like a white shoe. We'll have these on the store. And this is just your standard pea that you order either from Talk Tools or Arc Therapeutic. You can find these out and about or something similar. What you're looking for is something that the kids can easily grab onto and hang on to, and they can dip just the tip. So whether you're going to use something like this or a true dipper, this is where we start. And then we move to a self-feeding spoon, and this is just one type. But meanwhile, while they're holding on to those, if you want to be offering purees or chopped foods, I like the Gerber coated spoon, and you could find these, gosh, anywhere, any grocery store, Target, etc.
I love, there's a video it's in our course. It's a video of you feeding one of my little patients.
Jack.
Yeah, I actually saw him today, believe it or not.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and you're using one of the teethers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually a really cute video because he sort of wasn't ready to eat. He wasn't ready to eat. He just wasn't interested. And then you presented it on the little teether and gave him a little kiss on his lips, and he tasted it, and then he was interested, and he took it from the teether. Yeah. And I thought that was a really beautiful moment. I show that video a lot.
I show that video in my courses too.
And it's a great example of reciprocal feeding too, and really asking permission to be fed.
Right.
Because so many of us go in with the spoon, and I did the same thing with my children when they were babies. You just sort of want to go in with the spoon and feed them because you're so excited and you want to see them eat, but not always are they ready for that.
Right.
And it was nice to watch for those signs of readiness that he's wanting to eat before you actually.
And throughout Raising a Healthy Happy Eater, we talk a lot about reading children's cues. And I think that's exactly what you're saying, is really understanding whether they are ready, whether they're in the mood. You got to keep it positive. I was thinking too that now that we've had a couple people join us, that I wanted to just take a minute to remind them that if you have questions, you can either type them in just where it says send a message. It's on the bottom corner of your screen there. You can use the queue and type in a question, and we're happy to answer it. Or you can request to join one of the seats that's in front of you, and we will accept you. And that means your face will be on the screen, and happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Open seat? Is this one?
Let's see, does it say locked right now?
This one is locked.
Yes, okay, it's unlocked now. Now we're good. Now we're good. Okay. So fantastic. Hi, Robin. I see Robin joined. That's awesome.
Do you want to explain to them how they can request to join a seat?
Yeah, you simply click on the empty spot that's right underneath the two of us, and it will say that someone's calling in, and then I click and accept you. So feel free at any time to do that. And by the way, if you like what Dr. Yum or what I'm saying, then be sure to click on here. I'm gonna do it for Dr. Yum. Give her a little props. See how I told her, yeah, I like that. That was really good. Jazz hands. And meanwhile, you can also go over to, you might see on your left-hand side of the screen, it'll say share last 30 seconds. Not everybody has that, but some might. That means that they'll record the last 30 seconds of what we're saying, and you can tweet that out to your friends. So just to share a little bit of the information for everyone. You know, we were talking about earlier how babies are first starting with solids and purees and doing some self-feeding, grabbing onto steamed vegetables or roasted vegetables. That's one of, I know, Dr. Yum's favorite things to start with babies. And when those little 6-month-olds are starting with that, you'll sometimes see their tongue go. It's so cute. They always remind me a little bit, frankly, because kittens do that too. And slowly over time, that tongue reflex will start to go away. We don't want to depend on that for safety, though. A lot of people think that they can hand a child just anything, and that tongue will just push out what isn't going to be safe and suck back what will, but that's not the case. So be careful. Always keep an eye on your child. But that tongue reflex is something that begins to go away, and we want to see it gone by about 12 months. One of the ways that you can help a child develop more of a mature swallow pattern, where instead of swallowing this way or pushing forward like that, they actually swallow with the tip of their tongue rising up to the roof of their mouth, and they look like this. And they swallow like a grown-up. Well, kids who stay on sippy cups or pacifiers or purees for too long often have difficulty with developing that mature swallow pattern. So we're going to talk a little bit about sippy cups. And here's sort of your standard sippy cup. And whether it's a soft spout or a hard spout, the problem with this is that the spout fits right over, this thumb is their tongue, right over their tongue. And when their lips close, they can't lift their tongue up to develop that mature swallow pattern. So instead, we really like kids to start on straw cups as soon as possible. And if you go to parentinginthekitchen.com, click on the free toolbox tab, and you'll have the 10 steps to teaching a 9-month-old to drink from a straw. So we're not going to walk you through that right now because you can just go there and download it. It's also in Raising a Healthy, Happy Eater. But just to demonstrate, I love these little take and toss cups. I was using that with this little kiddo earlier today. And rather than that hard plastic straw that comes with it, I insert a silicone straw. I get these from Talk Tools, talktools.com. They're the same straw that go inside a honey bear that therapists like to use. But I love them because I'm pressing really hard. You cannot compress this thing, yet it's soft in little babies' mouths. But once the kids learn to drink from it, again, follow those steps on parentinginthekitchen.com, then what you want to be sure to do is make sure that the straw is relatively short so that the tip of the straw goes to the tip of the tongue so that their tongue can elevate and they can develop that mature swallow pattern. Once kids know how to do that, then you can even move them to sort of, there's all these adorable little pop-up straw cups out there nowadays. They're great. But if you do decide to go with one of these after your kiddos learn to drink from it, then take your scissors and just snip that a little bit more so that when they put their mouth on it, their tongue can still rise up to the alveolar ridge. If you keep it too long, that's just a sippy cup because they can't move their tongue. Any questions so far?
I love the pop-up straws too, because a lot of why we do sippy cups is for convenience.
Yes.
And the straw cup in that way becomes really convenient for families. They avoid spills and all of those things that we parents don't like.
Yeah. You know, I often tell the story that sippy cups were invented by an engineer. It's true. They were invented by an engineer because he wanted to keep his carpets clean, which is a great idea. And then he sold the idea to Playtex. But now we have this whole generation of parents who are in their 30s who truly believe that kids are supposed to go from breast and bottle to sippy cup. And that's not the case. It was just marketed that way. We can just skip that stage and help a child develop a more mature swallow pattern, which will help them learn to eat more advanced foods without frustration by going right to a very short straw.
Yeah. You would be so proud of so many of my patients, Melanie, that walk in with their little straw cups.
I'd be so proud.
That's all you.
I don't know about that. But, well, great. Well, I can see we got a bunch of people now. So again, if you have any questions, just jump right in. You can type it in, or you can request to join us by being a part, just where it says the seat below us, just request right there to call in, and we're happy to have you on the program with us. Let's go ahead and talk about the big elephant in the room. Let's talk about hunger. Dr. Yum, I'm going to have a drink of wine when you talk about hunger. Take it away.
I have a friend who used to always say, hunger is the best sauce. And it really is. I just had a long conversation with a family of a toddler who is picky. I mean, what toddler isn't really? And they were feeding this baby a lot of snacks. And they're beautiful, well-meaning parents. But we really had a conversation. It really kind of was a light bulb moment, I think, for them to hear that if your baby arrives at dinner with a belly full of fish crackers, they're not going to accept or be open to trying the great meal that you made. And that hunger is really a little bit of hunger when you arrive at a meal is actually a really great thing when it comes to driving kids to try new foods. So it was really neat to see that mom have this light bulb moment and go, okay, hunger is not, it's not a bad thing. And that's a hard thing for a lot of parents, because I'm a parent, Melanie, you're a parent, and we want to feed our kids. It's just natural. So it goes a little bit against our natural instincts, but it really can be a great way to get kids onto some new foods, is to make sure their belly's not always full. So we talk a lot about, being on a schedule. And I can tell you as a pediatrician, it seems like snacks are 24/7, and snacks are a great way to keep kids quiet or keep them occupied. But I think overuse of snacks can really contribute to picky eating. And so in raising a healthy, happy eater, Melanie and I really spent a lot of time thinking about a great feeding schedule for kids that would include those very necessary snacks, especially for the young ones who need those little bursts of energy throughout the day, but really show parents that it's not open kitchen all the time, and that there should be there should be eating times, and then there should be breaks from eating. And we call those times growing times, because those are times when kids can step away from eating and focus on other areas of development. There's so many other areas to develop: motor skills, and speech, and cognition. And so I think when I have noticed when I phrase it like that to parents, it resonates with them. And they understand that it's not always good to be feeding your children at all times of the day.
Absolutely. And it's something like I like to model for parents, that when I'm working with their kids, to talk a little bit about, you know what? We just had eating time. Right now it's growing time. Let's go out in the backyard and go on the swing set. And one of the techniques that we like to use is on parentinginthekitchen.com, again, on that free toolbox tab, there is a kitchen closed sign. It's a big red stop sign. It says kitchen closed. And I like kids to put that up on their kitchen with a piece of tape, or we have more kind of open kitchens, like you're in your kitchen in your house right now. It's very open. And I like little kids just to put that sign on a ribbon and tape it on one end of the kitchen and run it across the other. Kitchen's closed. I think kids are so often, with our houses the way they are, they just tend to walk in and open the pantry on their own and say, I want some goldfish. And goldfish, I mean, they're yummy, but they're just belly fillers.
Right. Especially in the summertime, we've had a lot of conversations in my practice about how summertime, we think of as being a time of kids being active and eating healthy, but in truth, with all the kind of unstructured time, there's a lot of snacking and just kind of entertainment eating because kids are bored. So having that visual of it's really not time to eat now can be helpful, because when kids don't have a lot of structure, one of the things that they like to do is eat.
And sometimes parents need the visual too, and they do that in preschools all the time. No, that center is closed. You need the visual?
I do.
Come a little closer to your computer, so I'm having trouble hearing you. There you go. Hey, I just wanted to jump in here for a minute because Robin had a really good question. She is a speech therapist, and she said, do you have any ideas for encouraging eating in children who are visually impaired and tube fed? And I think what Robin's saying is that they have visual impairments and they're being tube fed. And, my favorite resource for that is actually my good friend, Dawn Winkleman. I'm going to try to, let me see if I can pop this up for you. Let's see. Hang on one second. They're working on it. This Blab is in beta, and so I'm trying to get Easy Peasy Fun to pop up for you. I'll keep working on it, but if you go to easypeasyfun.com, click on their blog, and they have an excellent piece on kids with visual impairments, and Dawn's very experienced with that. As a matter of fact, I know that she's visited our local school here for children who have visual impairments and helped with their eating. So that would be my first suggestion, is to take a look there. One of the tricky things about kids with visual impairments is naturally, not only are they having a challenge with one of their primary senses, but oftentimes their other senses become more heightened. And when you've got somebody who is cautious about the world anyway, whether that be a hesitant eater or a child with visual impairments or both, then you want to be respectful of that entire sensory system. And Allie says, Allie had a question. She said, in handy dandy spill-proof bowls to carry the fish crackers around the house. Yeah, snack traps. I just pretty much, whenever I see those in people's homes, I quietly put them in my bag and take them with me and throw them away. Yeah, we really want kids wandering around with snack traps full of crackers, because we know for sure that kids who graze all day don't bring in the nutrition or the calories. And so often with kids with feeding difficulties, the parents are scared, and they just, every time that little kid opens their mouth, they want to put something in there. So they're thrilled if they're walking around the house and just nibbling all day long. But the reality is, and the research shows, that those kids aren't getting the nutrients or the calories they need to grow. They need to have growing times and eating times. So even children who are being tube fed, we put them on a very strict schedule for those tube feedings so that they learn to develop a little bit of hunger, so that as slowly they begin to learn to eat orally, they already have that hunger cycle in place, and that's crucial. Any other questions about hunger before we keep going? Nnamdi, would you just talk a little bit more, and I'm going to take a minute just to try to pull up that one link for everybody one more time. We'll see if it works. Yeah, it doesn't want to take it, but definitely go to easypeasyfun.com and click on their blog and then visual impairments, and you'll see a really good piece right there. Well, let's talk a little bit more about that bump in the road when kids get to be about 18 to 23 months. And at first, things are looking pretty good, but sometimes they're starting to practice what it's going to be like to turn 2. And so depending on where their cognitive development is, right before they turn 2, you'll start to see kids start to say no a little bit more. It's one of the first words they learn. And they're just trying to figure out their world and get some control in their world. Is that something you run into, Dr. Yum, in your practice, that parents start to become concerned about the kids seem to maybe be trying on a little bit of picky eating, but they're not quite sure?
Well, I've had many conversations about this. Am I a little echo?
You're good. You're great there.
Great. I have known that the growth curve in kids from 0 to 1 is so steep, and parents really get lulled into this routine of every time I come to the doctor, the baby is gaining so much weight and such a great eater. And so it's a big shock in that second year when things really sort of tank in a way. The appetite can change. Certain foods that they used to love, they're now rejecting. And so what I have done is I spend a lot of time at the 1-year visit talking about and anticipating what will happen. So they are equipped and they feel confident and brave and they know what to do when their child enters into that phase. And I tell parents, it may be at 15 months, 18 months, it may be at 2, but you may see a real change in the way that your baby's eating. And your job is to not react. And put in front of the child. And for most typically developing kids, they really do know how much food they need to eat in order to keep growing on that curve, which is going to be a lot more flat, and they're going to need a lot less food and have a lot less interest and appetite in food. And don't feel like you have to offer those second and third options. And I often quote one of my favorite food writers, which is Michael Pollan, who says, if you're not hungry enough to eat an apple, you're not hungry. And so, of course, if you offer those highly palatable foods to a toddler, the sweet foods, the fruit snacks and the salty crackers, they'll take them because it's entertainment more than food and it tastes good. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's hungry, and it will often steer their eating habits into that junk food aisle. So I think spending the time at the 1-year visit really helps, and so they don't feel like, oh gosh, this is all different, and what do I do? And start making the peanut butter sandwiches instead of
right. Well, at least she'll eat this.
Right.
Yeah.
And they keep on that path, which they started so well with the solid foods at 6 months. And I found that to be a good way of approaching it with families.
I think that's great. I love the fact that you prep them ahead of time. Like, this is what's coming down the pike, and we're going to be talking more about it, but here's a few ideas because you're on your way to know. Well,
which is parenting proactively, right? Oh, I tell parents a lot too, and I'm sure you do too. When you're reading Raising a Healthy, Happy Eater, read a chapter ahead. So you kind of know what's coming and you can be prepared for it, and you can be in that sort of mindset of what baby's needs will be and how you should react. And I think that is a great parenting principle overall, is to parent proactively and sort of be one step ahead.
I think that's great advice. And, one of the things that we talk about in my seminars is this attitude that is, sometimes you'll especially see it on social media, that, no kid will starve, And the thing is, when you work with children in feeding therapy, we'll show you a lot of kids will starve. for sure. Those kids need extra help and the parents need extra support because usually there's something medical or physiological. Maybe it might even be their sensory system. Maybe it's something oral motor wise, fine motor wise, that really is causing them to stall in that developmental process of learning to eat. And they're just not capable of trying a lot of new foods, and they need true feeding therapy, just like some kids need help learning how to walk. So those kids will starve. But where we want to get those kids to is a place where they're eating with so much joy and so much skill that now the parents can say, babe, here's an apple. That's what's for snack. And if they choose to eat it, awesome. And if they choose not to eat it, we're not worried that they didn't get those calories because another meal or a snack's coming up within about 2 hours. So being able to let go of that fear is a big part of feeding therapy because it's the fear that stands in the way of progress more than anything else. But it's a very reasonable fear when you have a child who has a true feeding disorder. I'm going to
But it was very interesting to find out also some of the differences. I think one of the most surprising for me was the Inuits and how they start with blubber.
I was just going to ask you, remember when we were first writing the book together, you were telling me that they feed the babies blubber.
But listen, that's probably a pretty awesome food. It's probably great brain food,
right?
High in fat, probably a ton of omega-3s, all the things that the formula companies love to put in their formula.
Right.
Probably in blubber. So, and I bet the babies love it.
Maybe we need to come up with a new formula for those parents who aren't able to breastfeed, and we should just make sure it says added blubber. I think that would be good.
Everybody agree with that?
You know, it is, breastfeeding is one of those, such an emotional topic. And whether you're able to breastfeed for a while or not for very long, I wasn't able to for very long for a variety of reasons. And to this day, it kind of bothers me. But whatever I was feeding my child, I wanted to make sure that it was nutritionally sound and that it was wholesome and fresh. And what we discovered as we were doing the Kids Around the World section is that's really what all parents want. They want their kids to have fresh food that's with good nutrition, and it's obviously presented with love from every parent. But even when we were looking, you were showing me pictures of parents in Sri Lanka, and those were some really fresh foods right off of their plate that they would just squish with their hands. And remember how deep that mom's hands went into that baby's mouth? Yeah, and helped that baby just kind of sucked off her hand and ate a bunch of rice and smushed up beans and vegetables, and it was amazing and really flavorful.
Really flavorful, and I think what's interesting about that research is so much of that feeding is passed on through the generations.
Yeah.
And my family happens to be from Sri Lanka originally, although I was born here. And that's sort of how we were fed when we were little. And that sensibility about feeding is sort of passed on from generations. Even the idea of how you introduce really flavorful native foods like curries and spicy foods. It's sort of passed down from generation to generation. And I think there's so much that we can learn as Americans and in the West, from cultures and the sensibility they have that's been passed on. It was really lovely to see. My father took the pictures in a fishing village in Sri Lanka. Some mothers who were feeding, they were so happy and excited to show their babies eating. And they had a lot of fresh fish, lentils, greens, and they smushed them, they hand mashed them. And curry is really best hand mashed and eaten that way anyway. And the way that they presented the food even was really remarkable. It's so much of what I've learned from you about how you extinguish the gag reflex and how you work towards a mature swallow. And that, I think it's almost just passed on through the generations in a way that worked for others before them. So it was really lovely to see that.
I love Allie's comment here. She said, tripe surprises me. It's always fun to see what different families eat. And and honestly, it's about exposure. It's about whatever the kids are continually exposed to is often what they'll learn to eat. But what we run into in kids with feeding therapy is that, and I think you run into this too in your practice, I think it's just true for Americans in general, is that if we think the kid isn't going to eat something, we tend to give them kid food. Oh, well, let's just give them some chicken nuggets. They'll probably eat those. But the reality is, if we continue to offer foods over and over and over, the child would learn to eat a variety of different foods. It's just that everywhere we turn through the drive-through, there's something like chicken nuggets or French fries. By the way, you didn't know that I was going to do this, but I brought some chicken nuggets here today. And I got to tell you, I fed my kids a lot of chicken nuggets. So just don't make it so, I did it. Okay. This chicken nugget right here is over a year old. It's been sitting on my desk for a year. It looks no different than the day I bought it. So every time I'm tempted to drive through because I want something kind of salty and I want to dip it, I think about this. You guys, I don't know if you can hear this, but it's like rock hard. It's petrified. So
yeah, it's a great visual to show families and inspire them to try more whole foods.
Yeah.
I know we have a meal that was bought probably from a similar chain, and it's a hamburger meal, and it also became petrified over the span of about 2 years, and I would take it on the road with me, and it was very shocking to high school students to see this meal that was, we would have them guess how old it was, and there's a lot of shock and awe and disgust. That's what it takes to appeal to high schoolers sometimes, a little shock value.
Definitely. And of course, as a feeding therapist, my job is really just to support the family in their food culture. And if they're eating a lot of fast food, my first job is to make sure they're able to eat it safely and move through that developmental process and learn how to develop more mature skills over time. But what's interesting to me is sometimes parents just don't realize all the possibilities. And once they see that their picky eater is able to eat more, a slightly more variety of foods, they kind of open up their world and say, well, could we try some broccoli? And they start to adapt some healthier eating habits. And although that's not really my role, I'm not a registered dietitian, it's not to introduce a healthier food culture, it kind of just ends up happening. And it's because they begin to see all the possibilities. And I love that.
Yeah, I was thinking about how in raising a healthy, happy eater, we both realized that we're passionate about not just teaching about feeding and health, but just creating a new food culture in a way. Mm-hmm. And looking at your book, Baby Self-Feeding, and what I love about that is that there are so many ideas for real food that isn't grown-up food or kid food, but it's rather family food. And we both are so on the same page about this idea of one meal, one family. And we write about that a lot in Raising a Healthy, Happy Eater. You've encapsulated that in your book. I, over at the Dr. Yum Project, have been working for the past several months on updating our recipe website. And one of the tags that we have on our recipe is a baby food option tag. So that those are foods that families can make that can be adapted into baby foods. So the families aren't making separate, but from the very first bites, they're showing their babies how to eat just like babies.
Yeah.
And it's, there's a lot there, I think, for families between Dr. Yum and Baby Self-Feeding and Raising a Healthy, Happy Eater to show families that it doesn't have to be just about kid-friendly food. It really should be family-friendly.
Family-friendly. Yeah, definitely. Well, on that note, I think we're almost ready to wind down the hour, but I wanted to make sure that everybody knows that we'll be covering the next 3 chapters on Tuesday, August 16th at 7 p.m. And of course, you can follow us on Facebook at Parenting in the Kitchen, or My Munchbug is my Facebook page, and Dr. Yum is Dr. Yum's Facebook page. And likewise, we're on Twitter and other social media sites. But for sure, if you'd like to have your own book club with Raising a Healthy, Happy Eater with your neighbors and have goodies and wine and make it super fun, don't hesitate to go to parentinginthekitchen.com, download the book club guide from the free toolbox tab, and there's lots of different experiential activities there and recipes that you can make, and it's a super, super fun study guide. So I hope that you'll do that as well. Let us know how it goes. And then finally, if you're interested in taking the Picky Eater course, you can simply go to parentinginthekitchen.com and log in. Be sure to use code PICKY10, PICKY10, all in capitals, and that'll give you 10% off. It's a 5-hour course for only $39.99 plus 10% off that. And if you'd like to try to turn it in for CEUs, it's such a new course. I don't know if you'll get credit, but we do have the course materials listed there if you'd like to try to turn it on your own. But such a good price for 5 hours. I think you'll just love it. Anything else that you can think of, Dr. Yum, before we say goodnight?
I had a really good time, and I love this this new feature where we can show some of our videos. I enjoy showing them when I'm talking with families and when I'm talking with educators, and I'm glad we could share them. And now we know how to manage the volume.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much. I'll post this recording on our YouTube channel probably in the next 48 hours. Thanks so much for joining us, and everybody have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.